My name is Skip Rizzo, and I direct the Medical Virtual Reality Lab at the University of Southern California, and I'm also the chief scientist at Cognitive Leap. When a child is in a classroom, it typically brings out the challenges that they face in the real world. And you can't get that from a paper and pencil test, or even asking a child to recite numbers that they've just heard. That's okay. Those are all good measures. But in this environment, we can put a child in an actual virtual classroom, and we can test how well they perform on an attention task. Meanwhile, in the classroom, there's distractions going around, just like in a real classroom. So some children can pay attention in a very controlled environment in a test setting, and their problems in the real world aren't uncovered. In this environment, we actually get a good measure of how their performance would be in the real world by simulating the distractions, the activities, the realistic environment of the classroom, and thereby may have better prediction as to how a child will perform in the real world. When I first got involved in using virtual reality as a tool for assessing cognitive abilities, this came out of my previous work as a clinician working with brain injury. I worked with rehabilitation of people that had brain injuries, maybe a stroke or a car accident or a tumor. And I was always frustrated with the types of paper and pencil tests that we had available to us to measure cognitive function. When I learned about virtual reality, I realized we could put people in a headset and create a world that was more relevant to the real world and test performance within that simulation. This was a quantum leap. This was an advance in the capabilities of taking a technology and using it for a good human purpose. In this case, being able to measure performance within a realistic environment, within an immersive environment. Numerous research studies since 1998 documenting the effectiveness of delivering attention process assessment within a virtual reality environment. So when I met with Jack at Cognitive Leap, he was very interested in getting this out to the masses, to make this available to more people, more than what we would do in a university lab. So we ended up building out the VCAT, the Virtual Classroom Assessment Tracker or Attention Tracker. And in that work, we've expanded on my original research of the previous 20 years and have done it at a level that really goes beyond what was possible in an academic lab. So that's why I'm here today, and I'm very proud to say that the work of Cognitive Leap has taken a technology that is well matched to the needs of a clinical population, particularly children, and has produced a system that I think can make a real difference for helping children, to help parents, to help clinicians understand a child much better than previous traditional tools. I think it's very important that with young children, we do a proper assessment of their cognitive abilities at a time when we can make a difference for them, rather than waiting until they graduate high school and the problems that they had that could have been detected when they were young were overlooked. This is really important because in the field of child psychology, early intervention is the gold standard. So measuring a child's capability to maintain their attention in a classroom and to do it in a very systematic way, in a way that virtual reality allows us to do it, that is extremely important because attention skills, the ability to maintain a focused attention in a classroom, is the first stepping stone towards higher level cognitive functioning. So, if you can't maintain attention consistently over a period of time, it's harder to learn, it's harder to develop memory skills, it's harder to develop problem-solving skills. And so if you can detect when a child is having difficulty at an early age, then you can intervene. And then you can start to make a difference for that child, because there's a lot of ways that we can address problems of attention, whether we're using traditional methods or some new technology that's available. But early detection of cognitive problems is the key to being able to help a child get past those problems and to maintain a more normal trajectory as they go through their education. Well, we certainly know that cognitive functioning is tightly embedded with emotional regulation. If a child has a higher level of cognitive ability and can think through problems, a lot of times they don't get as emotionally dysregulated or anxious when they're presented with a challenge. So equipping a child with the skills to be able to think more effectively, even at an early age, I think sets a template for their future emotional development. And that's something we know that it's hard to differentiate cognitive from emotional when it comes to predicting long-term outcomes. But we know that cognitive functioning can have a strong impact on emotional functioning. And that's very important for maintaining a child's trajectory into adulthood in a way that's going to maximize not only what job they have, but their happiness in life. Sometimes children with ADHD, you see the problem in their social functioning with other kids. They interrupt, they don't know how to take turns, they're in their own kind of a world, and other kids might be turned off, and so their social group constricts. That's sometimes a good sign for detecting there might be a problem, because it's not just in the classroom performance, it might be how they interact with other children. So I think detecting that there's a problem early on and addressing it has benefits beyond just educational attainment. It may have benefits in terms of having authentic relationships with other people, where you're attending to another person when they're talking to you. You're not interrupting them, or you're not looking at the bird flying out the window instead of paying attention to someone talking to you about something important. So I really feel that this is a complex constellation of behavior that it's very important to be monitoring as your child is growing up. Their cognitive abilities, their emotional regulation, and their ability to interact with other people, whether it's adults or their peers. And this is important. This is important stuff for later on in life. This is important for a child's growth all the way through into adulthood and in later life. So the best thing you can do for your child when they're young and they're in school is to pay attention to these things. I think when parents hear from teachers that the child lacks self-control in the classroom, that they're impulsive, that's an initial red flag. Once we detect that a child might be having a problem in a certain area, like their attention skills, their ability to maintain attention in the face of distracting classroom activities, or whatever the challenge is for that child, once we detect that, then we can begin to develop treatment plans or training plans that help them to keep up with other children their age and to address that problem. Sometimes parents want to think their child is doing fine. They're active, they're engaged, they run around, but they don't see the behavior in the classroom that might impede their learning. So parents have to always keep a vigilant eye on, does a child maintain their attention on tasks that they don't particularly like? They might be glued to a video game because they like that, but to get them to do homework, they got the TV on, they got earpods on, but they're not focused on the task. So I think monitoring a child's use of social media and technology is an important thing, because children tend to gravitate towards those kinds of distractions in the home. And those kinds of distractions, while I don't believe we need to eliminate social media completely, but if it's overused, I think it could be an indicator of a deeper problem, and it can have long-term consequences to your child's learning abilities or their emotional regulation. And we have to be vigilant as parents to pay attention to those things. I think it's important that all children have regular assessments of their attention and their other cognitive abilities. Just like, you take the temperature of a child if you suspect they're ill. Well, we know from that 98.6 is a normal temperature. If something deviates from that, then you start paying attention. It should be no different with cognitive function. I think children should have this kind of fun and engaging assessment, these tests that aren't horrible to take, but they should be tested when they first go into school at an early age 5 or 6, and then repeated testings at some interval, whether it's every 6 months or every year, to see if things have changed. Because we know children get better, neurotypical children get better at cognitive functioning as they age. What happens if a child, age 5, they're at a normal level, but then age 6, 7, 8, they haven't gotten much better? The only way you can know that is through doing these types of assessments on a regular basis. One of the powers of using VCAT in this situation is to detect children that may appear to be good in a classroom because they're very well behaved and they're sitting quietly, but what's happening is they may not be taking in all the information in the classroom, and they're falling further behind their peers. We see this oftentimes in our data with little girls who are well behaved. They sit quietly, they're looking forward at the task, but they're missing the activity, they're missing the targets and not performing well. But if you were to observe them in a real classroom, they might be in the category of being good students because they're well behaved, but we're not detecting the actual problem with attention. I think little boys manifest the hyperactivity component of ADHD much more than little girls. Little girls can sit passively and be perceived as being good students and not detected as having a problem with attention. Whereas little boys, they're rambunctious, they're moving around, they're looking all over the place. They're the ones that get picked because they manifest the hyperactivity component of ADHD. And then they get attention, they get treatment, they get rehabilitation, they get training. Whereas little girls may fall through the cracks because they're being very well behaved, but their attention skills are still well below the age group that they're in. So that's why it's important to be able to measure attention using this kind of a system, because I think we're able to detect when there is a problem that might be missed by traditional methods. If we have computer software that allows us to engage a child and to measure their performance as they go through the training, then we're in a better position to understand what the benefits of that training are and how we need to modify it as the child continues to to go through that. One example is the HFS system. When a child is tested in the VCAT environment, they basically put on a VR headset and they're immersed within a virtual classroom. Now, the child's task is to attend to letters that appear on the board at the front of the class, and they have to respond when they see a certain sequence of letters. Meanwhile, all the distractions that you would find in a traditional classroom, kids on their cell phone or passing notes or a bus going by the window or an intercom popping up, all these distractions can be systematically delivered. So we can begin to measure how well a child can maintain their attention on a task while they're in the natural distracting environment of a classroom. Not only do we measure their ability to focus on the task and respond when they see a certain letter sequence, but we can also, through the head-mounted display, the headset, the virtual reality headset, we can measure their hyperactivity, their movement, where they're looking at different points in time. That gives us an additional measurement that's not possible with other approaches to measuring attention. So we can tell, for example, if a child is in a classroom and they have to pay attention up at the front of the class, like in a normal classroom, we can tell if they miss a target or perform poorly and they're looking directly at that target, or if they're missing the target because they're looking out the window or they're looking at the kids sitting next to them. These are two different kinds of attention errors. One is a loss of focus, the other is distractibility. A lot of times these kids can focus on a video game, but in a classroom where there's competing events happening in the world, they're very distractible. And we can measure that with our virtual reality headset. We can tell where the child is looking at any given point in time and be able to quantify how much time are they spending looking away from the task and missing a target versus how much time are they just looking at that target, but it's not processing. And that is a key element for designing rehabilitation plans or training plans to help a child to become more attentive in a real classroom. And I think HFS is one of those systems that can really make a difference for children that need this kind of additional training. This is a system that Cognitive Leap has developed that offers parents and children ways of monitoring a child's performance and giving them exercises that build their cognitive skills and their emotional regulation skills. This is something that wouldn't have been possible 15 or 20 years ago. This is something that now, with the advances in technology, with advances in AI, with advances in making some training activities almost like games that engage a child. We've tested thousands of kids and we've developed norms. How do typical 6, 7, 8, 9-year-olds perform in the classroom? Kids that don't have any attention problems, and build those normative data points so that then we can compare new kids and see where they fall in comparison to a normative standard. And that's something that is essential to this, because like I mentioned previously, I think we can look at a child's performance at age 10, 11, 12 and see how it compares across the age span and see that they're performing on this task like an 8-year-old or like a 7-year-old. They may perform on another task like kids of their own age, but now we're getting a more fine-grained analysis of where the problem is. HFS has some very compelling data to document that it is an effective tool for helping children to recover function or to build cognitive functions. That's something you have to have. Anybody can come up with some kind of a tool or a strategy and say, oh, it works, it's great. But without the science, there's no way to trust that that's really true. So Cognitive Leap is very focused on having the science to be able to back up the claims that we are able to make with our different software applications.